What's going on, people, and welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to do a quick generalised video on my thoughts to the 12-minute late entry protest that's going to take place at Rugby Park on Sunday between Kilmarnock and Celtic. The Celtic fans, after meeting all the supporters groups and team buses, have decided that they're going to do a 12-minute late entry protest into the ground to send a message to the Parkhead hierarchy after Celtic's abysmal statement last week after meeting with the fan association groups. I agree with it 100%. I really do. I'm on board with it. I think it needs to be done. There's been loads of ways. Well, like I said, all the supporters groups and associations met up a few days ago, and they have come up with a list of strategies. It's a long-term strategy to get rid of this board. It's going to take a while, but, it needs to be done. The board are killing the club every single year. They're not ambitious. They're lazy. They're not fit for purpose anymore. They've not been fit for purpose for a very long time. This is not just this season. This has been years and years in the making. Over 20 years at least. These people have taken the mick out of the Celtic fans. And people have had enough of it. The fans are the ones who pay the money. People will say, oh, well, the board have kept the club financially stable. That's true, but I believe that any board could do that, to be honest. I'm not saying the fans should be the ones running the club. I think they should have a say to a certain point. But, I don't think that the boards are fit for purpose anymore. I really, really don't. I agree with a 12-minute protest. Late entry into the ground. Obviously, there is going to be people who are against it, and they're going to still go in regardless, and do their own thing. It's very hard. It's very frustrating. You can't force people to do something, but I do think that those people who are choosing not to get involved in this are causing more of a problem. You're giving those people more money, I know you could say, well, people doing the protest, they're going to go in after 12 minutes and they're giving the club money as well. But, at least they're trying to do something about it. These people who are choosing not to do anything about it and walking in, that just proves you don't really care, really, about Celtic and the football side of it. You're supporting the board. Whether that's intentional or unintentional or not, there will be people with kids and stuff who will still go into the ground. I get some kids, young fans, are excited, want to go and see Celtic play. I honestly get all that. I really do. But at the same time, that is happy clapping. I'm sorry, that's happy clapping. The parents should be telling those youngsters, why they're not going into the ground for 12 minutes. In my personal opinion, that's what I would do if I had kids. Personally, I would explain to them, the people who run the club, are treating us terribly and we want to prove a point. So, yeah, that's awkward, obviously. Fans are going to boycott the Europa League. A lot of fans have already done that. Like I said, people are not on the home cut ticket scheme. I'm not watching any games, for the rest of the season. Any game in general, I'm not watching it. I haven't bought merchandise for Celtic for years and years and years, over 10 years. I used to give Celtic money. I did used to be a happy clapper about 10 years ago, but not anymore. After Ronnie Dyler left, even before then, actually, it might have been after Gordon Strachan left, I stopped buying merchandise. I don't care about these people who run the club. They treat me terribly. They treat all the Celtic fans terribly, and they need to go. They've never been good enough for the job, in my personal opinion, and I've hated them for years, so that's my protest in a way. I'm not a season ticket holder. I do have less of a say. If any international fans who can't get to games all the time or barely ever, of course we're going to have less of a say than the fans who are there every single week and are protesting against this. Of course we're not going to have as much of a say, but we are still part of the club in our own way. But yeah, people are saying it's going to affect the team on the pitch. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, but, that's just the way it's got to be. The team should be good enough, to deal with that. They're professional footballers. Brendan's a professional manager. It's not against them. People are saying, well, it's going to affect the team and you're taking it out on the team. But then saying that the board have caused this, the board are causing the problems for Celtic as a whole, I agree with the protest, like I said, 100% on board with it. People are saying it's not going to work, blah, 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 there should be more draconian measures. I'm sure there will be. Like I said, I think the rest of the season is going to be about more what goes on off the pitch than on the pitch. It probably will affect the players on the pitch, to a certain degree. But like I said, they're professional enough, they're good enough to deal with that, in my personal opinion. It's not against them. It's not their fault. It's not Brendan's fault. The only thing that Brendan's responsible for is the style of play and tactics and stubbornness. That is Brendan. I will say that. That's not the board. That is Brendan. But, in terms of the overall picture, lack of signings, lack of ambition, treating fans terribly on a match day, stadium not improved, things like that. That is the boards. The boards are the ones responsible for all of that. Will the board be there at the weekend? They probably will be, but they're saying that. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't turn up. That really wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, Dermot Desmond won't be there because he's a coward and he never goes to any of the games, rarely anymore, unless it's a big game, like a Rangers game or a European game or something like that. Then he might turn up. But still, I'm on board with it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't want fans to turn on one another. The happy clappers and the ones who are ambitious. I've seen a lot of things online. I've ended up arguing with some people, unfortunately. It's ended up in an argument because they just can't see anything. They think everything's okay and it's not. But I'm not going to force them to think that. They need to make their own minds up. It's very tough in the moment with the whole situation, because we haven't lost a game in the league. People say, it's not, the team seems to be doing okay in the league, but, what about the Champions League? This is the problem, Champions League, this is what it's all about, the Champions League, ambition. The boards seem to only care about domestic football. Some fans do, unfortunately, as well. It's very frustrating, but not every fan's the same, I guess. It is hard. It's going to be an interesting game on Sunday against Kilmarnock. Like I said, I'm not watching the game. I'll do a reaction to it. I'll watch the highlights and stuff, but like I said, I'm on board with this fan protest campaign strategy against the board. I done the survey that the North Curve sent out a few days ago. Answered all the questions honestly, gave my honest feedback. I'm on board with it 100%. I support the Green Brigade, the Celtic Disabled Association, Celtic Irish Association, all of that, all Ryan 118, all the people who were at that meeting, Celtic State of Mind, everybody who was at that meeting, I'm on board with all of them. The Celtic Trust as well. We desperately need to buy some shares, I think. I think that could make a huge difference as well. It's going to cost a lot of money and it might take a while, it might take a few years, but, it needs to be a long-term strategy. It needs to be us against the board for the considerable future until the board step down. It's going to be hard to get the board out. The board, people saying the fans can't get rid of the board. Yeah, they can. They're the only ones who can do it. If that means poor domestic success, then so be it. If we have to go through a spell where Rangers are winning trophies or Hearts are winning trophies or whoever, so be it. If it's going to get rid of these people, look at the Kellys and the Whites. I know it was a bit of a different situation in the 90s because the club was close to dying and going out of existence, and they had no money, so they had to sell up and go to Fergus McCann. But at the same time, I do honestly think you can get rid of a board of directors and you can get rid of Dermot Desmond as well, even if you're doing well and are financially secure and winning stuff domestically. It doesn't come down to that. It comes down to what's going on the European stage. Failure in the Champions League qualifiers constantly. The last 7 Champions League qualifiers, for example, we haven't won any of them. And it's terrible against teams we should be beating. I mean, you could say all the managers at the time in those games and the team let themselves down. Of course they did, but they will hold their hands up. At least they'll come out to the media and say, like the manager, Brendan came out and said that he was very disappointed with the 2 games against Kairat, But why did Michael Nicholson not come out and say, look, I'm sorry for not backing Brendan? that's what I'm saying. You know, the board don't take any accountability. The statement was a load of rubbish. It was AI generated. There is absolutely no way that was written by a board member. You know, obviously they got somebody to do it on their behalf via a computer or something like that. Complete garbage statement, showing their lack of disdain for the fans. You know, the fans hate them. They hate us. You know, we're not budging, either of us. You know, it's going to be a war between us and them for the rest of the season. But they've made it that way. You know, they've done it to us for years. You know, we've had enough of it. You know, and yeah, that's my take on it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens on Sunday. Like I said, I'm not watching any of the games the rest of the season, but I will still do match reactions. I'll watch the highlights to give my thoughts and stuff. But yeah, fans watching this video, take care, and I'll do a reaction on Sunday after the match against Kilmarnock. Peace.